guys, Misery here, back with another CZM video. And in today's video, we're going to be doing the ultimate Tenebria guide, whether it be epiphanies, partners, what deck she needs, like memory fragments, dupes, everything you need to know about Tenebria will be in this video. Right before we get into this video, I want to make a disclaimer just like every one of my other guides. I rank everything at a certain tier, with S being highly recommended, A being strong potential, B being awkward to use, kind of like niche, C outclassed, and F being practically useless. This is just my opinion and where I think everything should go. So if you disagree and have a different thought, that is totally fine. But generally, like, this is what I think about Tenebria. So getting straight into the video, what does Tenebria do and what role does she play? So Tenebria is a passion unit, a part of the psionic class. Her entire kit revolves around these creation cards she creates called rhythm cards. And all of her cards that consist in her kit scale off of these rhythm cards. The first card you're probably going to see of Tenebria's is Music Start. And that card is very important for which kind of build you want to go for Tenebria. It's kind of generally known that Arpeggio is the best Music Start epiphany, and Arpeggio is really good and has really good rhythm cards. Because not only are the base multipliers really high for Arpeggio, but there's also a ton of them, and they draw themselves too. But also another very important thing about Music Start, it's going to exhaust all basic attack cards. So this allows us to be able to keep basic attack cards in our deck and save us points, allowing us to get more divines on the deck. A lot of her cards and epiphanies have the ability to move rhythm cards from the draw pile or the graveyard to hand, or even in some cases activate cards in draw pile, which is like really nice. So although you do add rhythm cards into your draw pile and you think that you're breaking the cycle, it's actually not as bad as you think. Like Arpeggio creates, like, I'm pretty sure 6 rhythm cards in the draw pile, but you draw them pretty consecutively. So even though it's adding 6 into the draw cycle, it's really not that bad, because like I said earlier, Arpeggio can draw its own rhythm cards. But also some cards and epiphanies of Tenebria's scale off of the last card used. So if you use a rhythm card, the last card, some certain epiphanies get extra benefits. So she is a little bit sequence heavy, and you kind of gotta, like, plan ahead and be careful what you use in a certain correct order. But yeah, if you played Rita, she's kind of a little bit similar to Rita because they're both psionics and they both rely on heavy sequencing. But I think Tenebria is, a lot easier to play than Rita. But yeah, that's kind of a little rundown on what Tenebria does, what role she plays in the team. So getting straight into the epiphanies and what I rank them. Starting off with the first card, Music Start. So these first 3 are kind of like whatever. Crescendo, Staccato, and Fortissimo aren't really all that good. Mainly reason why Fortissimo and Staccato aren't that good is because Fortissimo, it scales off of linked cards. And the only way to get linked cards is either Haida Marie or her partner. There's not really much ways to get linked cards. And then for Staccato, that increases the cost of the rhythm cards, which is not good. You don't want that. You ideally want rhythm cards to be low cost because you have so many of them. So you're gonna run out of AP pretty fast if you're increasing the cost of them. And for Crescendo, the reason why this one's B tier and not C tier is because this one is somewhat decent. It's not really like punishing you in a negative way or has a lot of restrictions. It's decreasing the cost of the rhythm cards rather than increasing it. So Staccato increases it, but Crescendo decreases it, which is why Crescendo is a little bit higher than Staccato. But as for Fermata and Arpeggio, the reason why Fermata is good is because it has a lot of accessibility. You can choose what rhythm card you want with Fermata. Not only that, but you're also going to be drawing them too. Like Fermata allows you to select what rhythm card you want, but also draw it. And then for Arpeggio, like I was talking about a little earlier, Arpeggio is just really good because it has the highest multipliers out of all of the rhythms, but there's also a ton of them. There's 6 of them, and they draw themselves. So you can cycle Arpeggio pretty easily. If you've seen other Tenebria showcases on YouTube, Arpeggio is not really that hard to cycle, and it does the most damage. So yeah, Arpeggio instant S. Fermata A tier, second best if you don't want to go Arpeggio for whatever reason, but I highly recommend to always go Arpeggio. And then Crescendo, Staccato, and Fortissimo, I really wouldn't highly recommend at all. Moving on to the next epiphany card we have, which is going to be Spotlight. So there's a few good options here, but most of them are kind of niche. So this first one is kind of outclassed by the middle one, because the first one moves 2 rhythm cards to hand, but it's not going to be activating them. Whereas the third one, it moves to hand, but it also activates them. So that saves you a lot of AP despite the third one being 1 cost more, it will activate them. The first Spotlight does decrease the cost of those cards until activated, but the problem is if it's an OTK build or you're on turn 1, your 5th and 4th cost Arpeggios are probably not going to be at 0 yet. So something like the third Spotlight is going to save you a lot of AP in those early turns. The second upgrade Spotlight, I guess you could run if you are running Spark of Passion set on her, but I really don't recommend running this upgrade just because there's way better options. This upgrade is only going to create 1 Spotlight when 3 rhythm cards are activated. And not only is the big problem that it's 1 time per turn, but just the base epiphany of Spotlight isn't that good compared to some of these other ones like the S tier one. So it just doesn't really make sense to go that upgrade. And then like I was talking about earlier, the third Spotlight, this one's going to be really good, going to save you a lot of AP despite it being 2 costs. It's going to select and move up to 2 rhythm cards in hand, then activate those cards. Really good for Arpeggio because those Arpeggio rhythm cards are going to be 5 costs, 4 costs, 3 costs, so on and so forth. As for the 4th Spotlight, it's going to be kind of similar to the 3rd Spotlight in a way. You can select up to 3 rhythm cards from among your draw pile and graveyard and move those cards to the top of the draw pile, and you'll draw 1 of those. This is really good when you have your 5 cost and your 4 cost Arpeggio rhythm cards at 0 cost already, and you can pick both of those, and then you pick something like the 1 cost one to draw both of those, and you can can cycle it for a lot of damage. I actually showcased that in my previous video on the 1-turn kill on Nebula Distortion against the Cool Bone with Tenebria. If you want to go check that video out, I used this spotlight. And then as for the 5th spotlight, you may be looking at this and thinking it's a 0-cost draw too, but in reality it's not. If it doesn't draw rhythm cards, it's going to discard them. So if you're trying to cycle your entire deck, you're not going to be able to do that unless like most of your cards like scale off of discarding, like Quietus such as, then maybe this can be good, but it's just like too much RNG, and like most team compositions aren't going to have all Quietus cards or cards that want to be discarded. There's just like way better options with the 3rd and 4th. But yeah, that's our Epiphany card spotlight and what I ranked them. Kind of like a little rundown on what you need to know about it. Moving on to our next card called Call and Response. So this is probably going to be the remove target for most of the decks. Like there are some good options here, but I wouldn't necessarily say there's a definitive S tier for any of these. Like this first one with the attunement, this one's pretty good because, you know, it's just there for the attunement. It's going to draw 2 rhythm cards. You're probably not going to actually play this unless you have leftover AP, but you can still get value out of this without even playing it because you'll just draw 2 rhythm cards for free. The second one is kind of on the fence of B tier between B and C tier. It's just like outclassed. Like there are way better ones that I'd rather run than the second one because this card is not going to be your main nuking card. So I'd rather just run something for support such as this 3rd one where it draws 2 rhythm cards, and if it's in draw pile, activate this card when a rhythm card is activated. So this can actually get activated when it's in draw pile for free, and it doesn't need to be in your hand. So that's free value there, and you'll draw 2 rhythm cards. As for the 4th Call and Response, when a rhythm card is activated, add 1 hit to this card, max 5 times. In theory, this sounds good, but there are just way better options. This could go upwards of like 800% damage, but why would you just go this Call and Response over the 7-cost one when the 7-cost one does 800% already? Because the 7-cost one counts as a rhythm card. It's treated as a rhythm card as it says on the text. So if you get something like the Spotlight that's 2 costs and activates 2 rhythm cards, you can actually use that to activate this 7-cost Call and Response. So in reality, you don't need 7 AP or to decrease the cost of this Call and Response to even play it if you have like something like that 2-cost Spotlight that activates the rhythm cards. But yeah, the 7-cost Call and Response, A tier just like the 3rd and 1st one. This one has some pretty high damage multipliers if you kind of want to go for like a nuke build. It also slots in and has synergy, like I said, with Spotlight, can easily be activated. So yeah, that's our card Call and Response. This is probably going to be the remove target. Whether you remove this or keep it is up to you. Then moving on to our next Epiphany card called Encore. So this card has some decent options like this first one. This first one is S tier. It's really good. If the last card activated was a rhythm card, activate that card 2 times. So if you use the 5-cost Arpeggio, let's say you have like the 5-cost Arpeggio at 0 cost and you use that, then you use this Encore, you're going to get that 5-cost Arpeggio twice again. So although you do have to sequence it correctly, the ceiling for it is pretty high. The second Encore is kind of just like Kayron's E2 if you are familiar with Kayron. For every 2 rhythm cards activated, 100% damage to the enemy with the lowest HP. This just like really isn't worth it. Like 100% damage is kind of like nothing, and it requires 2 rhythm cards. Like you're probably not even going to be doing at least 10 rhythm cards a turn. So like the value out of this second Encore is just like really minuscule. This 3rd Encore is pretty good because for the next 3 rhythm cards activated, decrease cost by 1 and it adds a hit. So you play this and then the 3 upcoming rhythm cards, you know, they're going to have their cost decreased by 1 and get an extra hit. So if you're using this with something like the 5 or 4 cost Arpeggios, it's going to be really nice because it's going to add a hit and basically count as 2. As for this 4th Encore, the 3 cost activate all rhythm cards in graveyard. This has some niche use. A lot of your rhythm cards are going to be going to the graveyard. So if you have a bunch of stacked up there, you can use this and it'll activate all of them. It's going to be a lot better with Arpeggio since Arpeggio has like 6 rhythm cards. It can activate all of those. Probably wouldn't recommend to run this 3 cost Encore if it isn't in an Arpeggio build. And then this 5th Encore, draw 1, 0 cost. It's basically just like it's free. Like it's draw neutral, it's 0 cost. If the card drawn was a rhythm card, increases damage amount by 100% until activated for 1 turn and repeat 1 more time. So yeah, if you also do draw a rhythm card with this draw 1, it'll activate again. So potentially can turn into like kind of like a draw 2. But it basically costs nothing. 0 AP, it cycles itself. So yeah, no harm in picking this Encore. And yeah, those are all the Encore Epiphanies, what I kind of like think about them. Moving on to our next and last card, the one that can't get an Epiphany, called Photo Time. So this is probably going to be a remove target also, just like Call and Response. I see a lot of people removing Photo Time because it's not really that good of value. So every time you activate a rhythm card, you'll get Performance Buzz. And you actually do not need to play this to get the Performance Buzz. I'm pretty sure as long as this is in your hand, it'll change the Performance Buzz on the card depending on how many you use. So say this is in my hand and I use 5 rhythm cards without even activating the Photo Time. It should go up to 6 Performance Buzz. So you can use this at the end of the turn in case, you know, you maybe think you might not have enough AP to play it at that time in the beginning of the turn, but it's basically just 100% damage to a random enemy for each performance stat, which it goes up to 10 stacks. So that's 1000% damage amount. That may sound like a lot, and you know, for some extra chip damage, it can be nice, but it's also taking up another draw slot and it doesn't cycle itself. So if you cannot cycle your entire deck already, I highly recommend to remove Photo Time because you want to cycle your entire 3 decks every turn if possible. That's the most efficient way to, you know, play your decks at an end game level. But yeah, that's your card Photo Time. I remove leave it in most of my decks. You can keep it if you have the space, like I said. And then moving on to her ego skill called Everyone's Idol. So her ego skill is really good, but the problem is that her ego skill is really expensive. If you look at the top left, 7 blue bars, that means it's 7 ego points. But for the next 7 rhythm cards activated, increase damage amount of rhythm cards by 7%. If activated 7 times, add 1 hits to the next 7 cards activated. If activated 7 times, add 1 hits to the next 7 rhythm cards activated. So it adds 7% multiplicative every time you use a rhythm card, going up to 49% multiplicative, which that is a ton, especially for something like the 5-cost arpeggio. Like if you have a 5-cost arpeggio at 3000% multiplier, and you get the 50% multiplicative off of the ego skill, that's going to add an extra 1500% multiplier on top of the existing 3000 already. So yeah, her ego skill is better used when you have high multiplier cards. That's not even just for Tenebria, that's for anyone in the game in general. You want multiplicative buffs on high multiplier cards. But yeah, like I said, not only are you going to be getting this multiplicative buff, but it's also going to be adding hits onto the next 7 rhythm cards, which is going to be really good. But besides that, it's kind of like a self-explanatory ego skill. Just try to use this as soon as possible in the fight. And then moving on to the partners we're going to talk about for Tenebria, starting off with Arya, her designated partner. This is going to be her best in slot, of course. Highly recommend to get Arya if you plan on investing in Tenebria, because Arya is just like way better than the previous option, which is going to be Eloise. Because for the Psionic class, there isn't really much partners. There's only one 4-star partner for the Psionic class, which is going to be Eloise. Which you're going to go Eloise if you cannot get or want to pull Arya. But basically what Arya does, increases the Psionic combat's attack by 16%, but it's going to increase the damage amount of the Psionic combat's basic attack cards by 4% for each basic attack card that shares the same name, with a max of 24%. So 24% multiplicative, which is going to be like really nice for an arpeggio build, since those multipliers are high. And then when a basic attack card is activated, the Psionic combat gains 1 Swelling Melody. And Swelling Melody is a new buff that gives plus 5% critical damage to the Psionic combat with a max of 4 stacks. So that's plus 20% critical damage off of Arya. So not only are you going to be getting multiplicative buffs for your basic attacks, but you're going to be getting crit damage also. And then for Arya's ego skill, increase damage amount of the Psionic combat's basic attack cards by 20%. If a Psionic combat's ego skill was used, increase cost of a Psionic combat's basic attack cards by 1 for 1 turn. So not only are you going to be getting that 24% multiplicative buff off of the passive, but you're also going to be getting another 20% off of the ego skill. But yeah, highly recommend Arya if you plan on heavily investing and going into Tenebria. If not, then I just recommend Eloise. That's what I use because I don't plan on pulling Arya. I just use Eloise, and Eloise works perfectly fine, gets me through all the content. I'm not even going to rank Antea off of the battle pass because like she's horrible for Tenebria. Antea gives an additive damage buff, and additive is like really bad on Tenebria. You do not want additive on Tenebria since her multipliers are so high, you want multiplicative. But yeah, Arya for the more premium option, and then Eloise for the more free-to-play option for the partners. And then moving on to the potentials, starting off with this first major note here, we have add the following effect to Sound Check, which is the basic card, Incinerate, heal 50%. So you're actually going to want to pick this up because like as we know, Tenebria exhausts the basic cards, right? But since this adds Incinerate, once you exhaust those basic cards at the beginning, you're also going to get a heal, which this is more helpful for things such as like Chaos or Sortie. It's not really that important or valuable in save data content, but like yeah, Sortie is going to be really good. And then onto the next major note, at the start of the battle, increase damage amount of Tenebria's rhythm cards by 10%, and if Tenebria's attack is 500 or higher, increase damage amount of other combatants' rhythm cards by 10% as well. So yeah, you're also going to want to pick this up because you know more damage for rhythm cards, that's going to be her main source of damage, and yeah, can't go wrong with more damage. Then moving on to her last major node, probably the most important one here, if Tenebria's attack is 600 or higher plus 5% passion attribute damage amount, and for every 20 attack exceeding 600, add an additional plus 2% with a 10% max. So you're going to need 700 attack to max that out for a total of plus 15% attribute damage amount, which you know is going to be like more damage just like the last major node. As for the other potentials, you know, just go with this crit damage node and this crit chance node. You can never go wrong with more crit chance and more crit damage because you know that's a big damage increase. And then something also very important is going to be increased damage, shield gain, and heal amounts of basic cards by 20%. As we know, Tenebria scales off of basic attack cards, so this is going to be really valuable for her, and I recommend it to max this out. And then finally, getting on to the first recommended deck that I advise for you to farm for is going to be this Encore deck. So this Encore deck is going to be really good and high damage output. The music start is going to be on this specific Divine Epiphany. This Divine Epiphany is going to be like best in slot for any music start. At the start of each turn, when this card is the first card used, draw 2, and you know it has the opener tag. It's always going to be played first, so that's a free draw 2, and it's going to make setup turns a lot easier. As for the Spotlight, it's going to be the 2-cost one, so we want a reduced cost Divine on that. It's going to be select and move up to 2 rhythm cards to hand, and then activate those cards. Going to ideally want to be selecting the 5-cost and 4-cost Arpeggio with that Spotlight. And then for the Encores, it's going to be the Epiphany. If the last card activated was a rhythm card, activate that card again 2 more times. And with the Encores, ideally going to want to be using the 5-cost Arpeggio one since it'll activate it 2 more times. And you know, there's also going to be 2 vulnerable Divine on the Encores. You're going to be getting a ton more damage with that vulnerable, since vulnerable is the best debuff in the game. You know, makes you do so much more damage. And then as for the persona, you're probably going to want to be running this persona on most decks for Tenebria. It's just going to be the draw 1 Epiphany when attack card is drawn, 2 morale for 1 turn. And then for the engravings, 2 of the increased damage amount of attack cards of this unit by multiplicative 30% for 1 turn, equaling a total of 60% multiplicative just from the persona. And then for the last card cards in the deck, we just have 2 gear bags for, you know, more cycle and more draw. Since Tenebria is a psionic and pretty negative in the draw cycle economy, it's going to be really nice for us to get gear bag so we can cycle and get through our entire 3 decks. As for the next deck that I recommend, it's going to be kind of similar with, you know, the same music start, same persona, same gear bags, but the epiphanies on Spotlight and Encore are going to be different, and we also keep call and response here. So this deck is actually pretty similar and, you know, practically the same as the one used in my rank 1 Great Rift guide. If you guys watched that video, it was my previous video, shows you how to get like rank 1 in the Great Rift and the decks we use. This deck is the one used for that run, but even outside of Great Rift, this deck will do just fine. You know, going to be applying 2 vulnerable with each Spotlight, and you get to select 2 rhythm cards and activate which ones you want. Ideally going to want to be going after the 5 cost 4 cost arpeggio, and just like I said with the previous deck, vulnerable, best debuff of the game, going to be doing a lot of damage. The call and response is actually going to get played itself, so you actually don't got to worry about that, you know, spending AP on that. Draw 2 rhythm cards, F and draw pile, activate this card. When a rhythm card is activated, it'll activate itself and free value there. And then the Encore is just going to decrease cost and add 1 hits for the next 3 rhythm cards. Also has a draw divine, so it'll cycle itself. And then for the last deck, I suppose you could go, this is the deck that I used in my very first Tenebria showcase video for the 9 out of 9 Nebula Distortion 1-turn kill. It's going to be the 3 Spotlight on the 0 cost Epiphany. Select up to 3 rhythm cards among draw pile and graveyard and move those cards to the top of the draw pile, draw 1 of those cards. So this Epiphany is also pretty good for cycling arpeggio. You're going to be able to select the 5 cost, 4 cost, and then whatever other one you want for the rhythm cards. Pretty consistent way of doing a lot of damage. And then we just have that on the 1 AP divine, kind of like this deck has a lot of AP divines, turning her into AP generator a little bit. But yeah, same music start, same persona, same gear bag, just as the other ones. And then of course we keep the basics because those are going to get exhausted off of music start. And yeah, those are the 3 decks that I recommend to farm for Tenebria. You can go after any of them, whichever one you prefer or want to go for. I prefer and recommend the Encore deck, the 3 Encore deck with the 2 vulnerable, as I have seen that do the most damage out of all 3 of these. So yeah. Moving on to the weapon gear slot and what weapons you're going to be wanting to go for in your save data runs. So starting off, just like any DPS, Criticism of Discord is going to be the best in slot weapon for any DPS, not just Tenebria, but you know, any DPS. Plus 80% attack is nothing to scoff at. That's a ton of attack, and that's going to make you do so much more damage. If you can't get the Criticism of Discord, you can go the Tentacles. This is going to give 8% ally attack, so you know, 10% less than the Criticism, but you know, 8% is still a decent amount. And it's going to be for the entire team, not just the holder. If you are farming in Zero System Swamp, which I recommend, Swamp is, you know, the best planet to farm any DPS because it has the dagger that tricked the shadow, which we're showcasing right here, plus 12% critical damage. You know, one of the best weapons in the game for DPS. But Swamp of Judgment also has things such as Fairy King's Crown, Verdant Shackles, Verdant Day, Verdant Night. It even has Clover for your supports. And then moving on to the last weapon I recommend that you can go for, which is RFS 17, plus 10% critical chance of attack cards with cost of 0. And you know, your 5 cost, 4 cost arpeggio most likely going to be 0 cost a lot of the time. So that's going to be giving plus 10% critical chance, allowing you to crit more and do more damage. Moving on to the armor gear slot, just like I was talking about before with Swamp of Judgment, Fairy King's Crown plus 6% critical chance, going to be really good, more crits, more damage. If you are farming in the Seasonal Chaos, you can go Mask of Emotions. When attacked, 2 resonance to the attacker 3 times per turn. And basically what resonance does, on card discard, 80% extra attack, then decrease resonance by 1. So ideally going to want to be running this Mask of Emotions with someone who can discard, such as Nia. If you can't get either of those, you can go Reinforced Combat Suit or even the boots in the shop. Both of these are going to provide shield, more survivability. But yeah, most of the chest pieces aren't really that good for DPS besides Fairy King's Crown. And then moving on to the accessory gear slot, starting off with Verdant Shackles. Verdant Shackles is going to be really good, plus 12% attack and plus 12% defense. Basically a better version of Tentacles of Chaos, but a worse version of Criticism of Discord. And if you can't get Verdant Shackles, you can't go Verdant Day. The reason I recommend Verdant Day over Verdant Night is because it's on odd turns. So turns 1, 3, 5 are way more important than 2, 4, and 6. Because, you know, people do OTK 1-turn kill stuff for content, and then turn 5 is going to be for tower. You know, people do like tower clears with 5 turns because that's the lowest amount of turns you can clear tower in, since, you know, every floor is 1 turn. But also, most of the content, you're probably not going to be going to turn 4. You're probably going to be killing everything like by turn 3. So yeah, that's why I recommend a Verdant Day over Verdant Night. If you can't get any of those, you also can go Eye of Eyeless. This increases damage amount of basic attack cards by 40%. And as we know, Tenebria, her whole entire kit revolves around basic attack cards and rhythm cards. And then lastly, for the accessory gear slot, go Amorphous Cube, plus 25% damage amount. It's not going to be a ton, and you know, like I said earlier, you really don't want additive on Tenebria, but it's going to be better than nothing. And yeah, those are all the gear slots and all the gear that I recommend to look out for when you're farming decks for Tenebria. Moving on to the memory fragments and what sets you're going to be wanting to run on Tenebria. So starting off, the best set for Tenebria is going to be triple 2. So 3 2-piece sets, 2-piece attack set, 2-piece crit damage set, and 2-piece Seth Scarab set. So one of them is going to give attack percentage, the other is going to give critical damage percentage, and then the third one is going to give a buff to basic attack cards. You don't necessarily need a Seth Scarab set. It's kind of just like a min-max. So it'll be just fine with simple 2-2, just 2-piece crit damage set and 2-piece attack set. But if you really want to min-max, you can go Seth Scarab. As for the substats and main stats, it's just going to be like any other regular DPS. Substats are going to be crit chance, crit damage, and attack. And the main stats, 4 slot is going to be crit chance, 5th slot is either going to be elemental percentage or attack, and then 6th slot is also going to be attack. Now, if you don't want to go triple 2 or double 2, you can go 4-2 with the 4-piece Spark of Passion set or the 4-piece Prelude set. Kind of depends on the team composition. If you have someone who can discard, such as Nia, then Prelude is going to be better because the Prelude set effect activates on discard. But if you don't have anyone in your team that can discard, then Spark of Passion is going to be better than Prelude. So that's the only downside of Prelude, is that it has a condition. And a Spark of Passion set, when an upgrade card is used, you're going to get a multiplicative buff. You're always going to be using an upgrade card with music start at the start of the battle. Doesn't have a condition that you're not going to meet. You're always going to meet that condition, unlike, you know, the Prelude one where not every team is going to be able to discard. And then for the 4-piece sets, for the last 2 slots, you can either go attack percentage 2-piece set, critical damage 2-piece set, or Seth Scarab 2-piece set. It's honestly up to you. Just go with whatever gear has more positive rolls. Those are the memory fragments and gear sets that I recommend for Tenebria. Now moving on to Tenebria's ego manifestations. Her E1 is kind of just like whatever, it's not that important. Most of the people I know remove photo time from the deck, but if you do keep it, then it's kind of just like a little nice damage buff. It's gonna go from 100% to 150% for each performance buzz stack. So you know, for a max cap of 1500% instead of 1000. Her E2 is kind of just like whatever. It's basically just like 2 ego points. At the start of the battle, create 1 photo card. When an ego skill is used, inflict 200% damage to random enemies for each of its original cost. Photo card, 2 ego points. Now the photo card isn't that important at E2, but her E6 has something to do with the photo card that comes from her E2. But yeah, considering her ego skill is 7 ego points, the 2 ego points is nice, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's like anything game breaking for a dupe. Now her E3 is actually like really insane and really good. It's gonna increase the damage amount, increase effect that everyone's idol gives to rhythm cards from 7% to 11%. So it goes from 49% to 77%. So an extra 28% multiplicative, which may not sound like a lot, but for how high her multipliers can get, this is actually really good. This E3 is gonna make you do so much more damage. So highly recommend it to pick up this E3 if you possibly can. As for her E4, each time a rhythm card is moved to hand or activated, you gain everyone's shear, and everyone's shear is a buff that increases Tenebria's damage amount by 1%, max 20% stacks. When stacked to max, increase damage amount of rhythm cards by an additional 10%. So this is basically just like another 20% multiplicative, and then once you're at max stacks, it's another 10% multiplicative to your rhythm cards. So a lot of multiplicative buffing in her ego manifestations, which is like really good because, as I've said many times in this video, we want as much multiplicative as we possibly can get for our rhythm cards with high multipliers. The E5 is the same as everyone else's, but it's honestly not as bad as everyone else's because it increases the basic card upgrade. And as we know, Tenebria's main damage source comes from those rhythm cards, basic attack cards. It's a small boost, not anything insane, especially for an E5. There's at least a silver lining there. And then onto her E6, which is like probably her best dupe and super insane. So when photo card is activated, decrease cost of Tenebria's next ego skill used by 3. When a rhythm card is activated, it will inflict 1 all eyes on you on the target. And it basically what all eyes on you does, increases damage amount taken from rhythm cards by 40% multiplicative. And if a rhythm card was not used manually, this monster becomes the target of those rhythm cards. When applied to a different target, remove all eyes on you. So it may sound like there's a lot going on this E6, but it's not as complicated as you may think. So going back up to the top of the text, let's start off what's new with the photo card once you unlock E6. So when you activate that, it'll decrease the cost of Tenebria's next ego skill used by 3. And like I said earlier, you want to get Tenebria's ego skill off ASAP, because not only are you getting 2 ego points from the photo card, this is also decreasing it by 3. So technically, your ego skill is only 2 ego points now instead of 7. And the faster that you get off that ego skill, the more damage you're going to do with all of those multiplicative buffs. Not to mention, the ego skill also gives more hits on the rhythm cards. So yeah, it is a pretty big damage increase at E6. But not only that, we're not even done yet. We haven't even talked about all eyes on you. So all eyes on you increase damage amount taken from rhythm cards by another 40% multiplicative. Like, there's just so much multiplicative stuff going on here. She does so much damage at E6. So if you are a whale or you have the crystals and you're debating on pulling E6 Tenebria, it honestly is one of the better options in the game for dupes. Her dupes are really strong. I highly recommend it if you love Tenebria, especially get the partner if you're going for E6. Like, the partner is gonna like buff her E6 like even more and make you do even more damage. But yeah, those are all of her ego manifestations, you know, really high value. Let me know down below in the comments what ego manifestation or dupe you're stopping at for Tenebria, or or if you just went all out and you E6'd her. And then moving on to the last segment of this video, it's going to be the team compositions. So there is only like a few teams that I highly recommend for Tenebria, one of them being Tenebria, Rei, and Nia, and the other being Tenebria, Rei, and Veronica. Specifically for Rift, Nia is going to be better than Veronica because you want to discard in Rift, but it kind of depends on how negative you are in the draw cycle, because Tenebria is really negative for draw economy, which is why you're probably going to want Veronica, because Veronica can go really positive in draw cycle. And the reason we have Rei in both of these teams, Rei's going to be like best in slot support for Tenebria, because Rei buffs damage amount of basic attack cards. With her Strike of Darkness, you can actually split the Epiphanies on Strike of Darkness and stack the buffs for the basic attack card damage amount. But if you get two of the same one, then it only stacks the turns, not the damage amount. So you have to split the Epiphanies. But yeah, those are the team compositions that I highly recommend for Tenebria. If you have another team that you want to let me know down below, you can. Maybe you can run something like Hada Marie and a Tenebria comp for her, for TC mode build, but I don't really like recommend that, because like, why would you even need Tenebria on the team when Hada Marie is just like the best DPS in this game and just so overly powered? That's going to be the end of this video. I hope this video was informative. I hope it was helpful. If it was, I very much appreciate if you could show support the channel, whether it be like, comment, subscribe. I appreciate it all. It all means a ton to me, and you guys have been showing tons of support. We're on our way to 6K subs. Honestly didn't think I'd make it this far, but here we are. So thank you guys again. If you have any video suggestions or ideas that you want me to do, let me know down in the comments and I'll take it into consideration. But yeah, just also let me know in the comments what your general thoughts on Tenebria is so far. I think she's like one of the best DPS in the game currently, for sure a top 3 DPS in the game. She's really strong. But if you are one of the few people who are skipping her, let me know why. That's going to be the end of the video though. I hope you guys take care, peace, and be safe until the next one.